My next guest, local lawyer and Republican Party National Committeeman Peter Feaman. President Trump won Florida, but alleges fraud elsewhere, as you well know, though no evidence has surfaced, according to a federal watchdog group.
Well, Michael, I have to beg to differ slightly with your statement that there's no evidence of fraud. In fact, I would suggest quite the contrary. There is abundant evidence of fraud. In the Trump campaign's lawsuits in multiple states, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of affidavits, which are sworn testimony under oath by witnesses, election workers, and others of fraudulent activity. So I think the premise that there's no evidence of fraud has to be corrected.
Enough to turn the outcome of this election. The New York Times said it talked to election officials across all 50 states who said if there are any problems, there's certainly not enough to turn the tide of the vote here.
Well, we don't know yet because the first piece of evidence has not been admitted into a court of law. There's recounts going on in a couple of states. And so we are very far away from finding out who our president-elect is going to be. Plus, you cite the New York Times. I would question the motivations of the New York Times because, as a lot of people are aware, they have abandoned their journalistic integrity and neutrality years ago, and they've been an anti-Trump media outlet consistently now for the last 4 years.
No issues with the Florida vote this time, but what do you say to people who said, well, wait a minute here. Republicans did better in the House races. Republicans did well in the Senate. We don't know if they'll hold it yet because of the Georgia runoffs. So if there was going to be overt efforts at fraud, why wouldn't the Democrats go ahead and make sure that Republicans lost up and down the ballot? Seems a little odd, and people say Republicans are cherry picking to try and make a case that simply isn't there.
I don't think cherry picking is the right word. In all of these states, there is evidence of foul play. For example, in Michigan, when I went to bed at 2 a.m. on election night, Michael, Trump was ahead by about 300,000 votes. When I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning, suddenly he was behind. That doesn't happen unless something funky is.
Oh, wait a minute. You knew that the mail-in votes were going to be counted later. That's not true. You knew that the mail-in votes were going to be counted later, and it was the president who was assailing the mail-in votes. Some say he hurt his own cause. And the mail-in votes not being assailed in Florida, and yet it was a huge part of his victory in Florida. Granted, the mail-in votes are counted before Election Day. Many argue that's the only difference.
No, there's a big difference. The Florida legislature and our leaders, our Republican leaders in Florida, have made the necessary changes since 2000 and our debacle then to make sure that what is happening in these other states can't happen in Florida. That's why we didn't have any problems, because we have the necessary laws in effect to make sure that there's no election fraud and inappropriate conduct on election day. Plus, we get to count our ballots before Election Day, our mail-in ballots. So we don't have the problems that the other states had, and that's because of the good Republican leadership that we have had and have in Florida.
Final question. What's it going to take to assuage your concerns before January 20th?
Well, it's long before that. My concerns is I want to see the process play out. You know, when we had Bush Gore in 2000, the process played out for over 30 days, over a month, until we determined a winner. People should not rush to judgment here. This is a close election, just like in 2000, and we really shouldn't even have a president-elect until the process has played out. That's what concerns me the most. Let the process play out before you declare a winner.
And when it does, will you accept, if in fact the process plays out, that Joe Biden's the winner, if it plays out as you want to see? Very briefly, please.
Of course. Absolutely. The rule of law is what must guide this process. And if the rule of law is followed, then let the chips fall where they may, and we'll accept the winner, whoever that might be. But so far, we need to let the rule of law play, because confidence in our electoral process is very important.
Late last week, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which spearheads federal election protection efforts, said the November 3rd election was, quote, the most secure in American history. Officials went on to say they have no evidence that any voting system was in any way compromised. Coming up, from election controversy to sharply escalating COVID worries, the warning from a doctor next.